Okay. All right, so we're recording. This will be posted sooner or later. Oh, there's something I just wanted to mention. We have a good friend, Justin Kirshner, who converted many of the old videos that were done in WizIQ that could not be uploaded to YouTube. He's converted several of them. He's still in the process of converting others, but I have uploaded them to, I uploaded 2 or 3 today to the YouTube track, and you could find them over there. Everything was uploaded today, so it'll have today's date on it, 10/13. Some interesting videos over there, if I dare say. But anyway, you can see them over there. Yeah, it was. I'm sure it's a monumental task to convert it from an EX file, an executive file. I think that's what it's called, to PDF to MP4. But he did a great job. So there you go. The quality of the video might be a little bit less than you're used to, but anyway, the ideas are there. So you're welcome to go and have a look. You have nothing to do. You have some more videos to watch. Okay, let's begin. Executable, yes, not executive, executable. The errands are sent. That's a must watch. I uploaded that one today. Great. Okay. Very good. We are going to start Sefer Yetzirah. We're Sefer Yetzirah 1.5. Oh, another thing I must mention. I will not be giving a class tomorrow night because I am going to what's called the Sheva Brochas. I think I mentioned in the email as well. A Sheva Brochas means a continued wedding celebration. A friend of mine, his son got married. The tradition is to have 7 days of celebration, and tomorrow is one of those days of celebration. So I am going to be going to his simcha, his how shall I say it? His simcha, his joy. He's making a party basically tomorrow night. That's basically the story, and that's what I'm going to do. Let me just for 1 second. Let me just stop share for one. Oh, maybe I could do it from here. Yeah, if you need to be unmuted for whatever reason, just let me know. But it's easier, it's just easier this way in terms of recording. Okay, good. So Sefer Yetzirah 1.5, first chapter, 5th teaching, or 5th mishnah as it's called, and it begins like this. Eses Sfirot Bli Ma. I'm going to read the Hebrew and then I'll read the English and explain it. Eses Sfirot Bli Ma, the 10 Sfirot of nothingness. Bli Ma means without substance, essentially. I'll explain again what that means, although we explained in previous classes. I'll just explain briefly again in a minute. Midatan Eser She'en Lahem Sof. There are 10 of them, but each of them individually have no end. Their measure is 10. In other words, the 10 Sfirot, 10 emanations, but they have no end. Omek Reshit, and now he begins to explain them. Omek Reshit v'omek Acharit. It's the depth of the beginning and the depth of the end. Omek Tov v'omek Ra, the depth of good and the depth of evil. Omek Rom v'omek Tachat, the depth of height beyond, the depth of above, I suppose you could say, and the depth of below, well, that's how he translates it, and the depths of below. Omek Mizrak v'omek Ma'arav, the depth of the east, depth of the west. Omek Tzafon v'omek Darum, the depth of the north and the depth of the south. And then concludes Adon Yachid, one master, right? One master, single master, Kel Melech Ne'aman, the faithful and true king, Moshel B'Kulan, who rules over all of them, Mimon Kocho, from his holy abode, Ad Adei Ad, forever and ever. I think that's how he translates it. Until eternity of eternities. Yeah, from his holy dwelling until eternity of eternities. Anyway, there you have it. 10 Sfirot of nothingness, the measure is 10, which have no end, the depth of beginning, the depth of end, depth of good, depth of evil, depth above, depth of below, depth of east, the depth of west, north, south. The singular master, the one master, God, faithful king, dominates over all of them from his holy dwelling until eternity of eternities. Now, this is the Aryeh Kaplan translation. I suggest that you, and those of you who have it, look into it, perhaps after the class or whatever he brings, some of the classical explanations. I'm going to bring mostly explanations that are not from the classical explanations, but more from the explanations of the Arizal and particularly the Baal Shem Tov and his disciples. And we will see how that plays out. Anyone who does not have a PDF of this book or doesn't have the book itself, you can write to me at kabbalah-decoded@gmail.com and I will send you a copy. I'll attach a copy. Again, Kabbalah is Kabbalah decoded, one word, kabbalah-decoded@gmail.com. Okay, so we can stop sharing now and we can continue with the explanation. Now, when we excuse me, when we discuss this particular mishnah, you will see immediately that when we say that there are 10 sfirot without substance, or 10 sfirot of nothingness, as he translated it. Now, what do we mean by the 10 sfirot of nothingness? Although we've translated this before and explained it before, just to recap the idea, 10 sfirot of nothingness. Here we are talking about, there's actually, in Kabbalah itself, there's a disagreement, or perhaps disagreement is not the right word. There are several interpretations of where the 10 sfirot of nothingness are located. According to some commentaries, the 10 sfirot of nothingness are located in higher than the world of Atzilut. The 4 manifested worlds of the world of Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, and this is higher than that in Adam Kadmon itself, or in some aspect of Adam Kadmon, the world of Nikudim, the world of Akudim perhaps. But in any event, they call the 10 Sfirot, Blima, the 10 Sfirot, the 10 emanations without substance. Why without substance? If we're talking about them in the world of Atzilut, the vessels of the world of Atzilut are completely unified with the light that is within them, and therefore they don't project themselves as limitations. They don't have the limitations of what vessels normally have. The limitations of vessels only begin from the next world down, from the world of Bria. The world of Bria, the world of creation, is a world where the vessels actually take upon themselves their ultimate function, which is to limit the light in order that the light can come to be revealed down below on lower planes of existence. Since Bria itself is quite a high plane of existence, it's after the world of Atzilut, the world of emanation. In the world of emanation itself, the vessels do not limit the lights. The vessels enhance the light. In other words, the vessels themselves are what you might call, in the world of Atzilut, are in fact, in a sense, congealed light. If you could imagine such an idea. That's why the Sfirot of the world of Atzilut are often called, the word Sfirah has a number of origins in Hebrew. The highest explanation of the word Sfirah is from the word sapir, Evan Sapir, a sapphire. Right? I think I explained this in a previous class not long ago. Evan Sapir, meaning a sapphire or a clear, it's not necessarily the blue stone, but it could be a diamond as well. It's called an Evan Sapir. It could be a Yahalom, it doesn't matter, whatever it is. It's a precious stone that gives off a tremendous amount of light. Obviously, the difference between a regular stone and a precious stone is that a precious stone reflects the light. Similarly, the origin of the word Sfirah in the world of Atzilut is the idea of the vessels giving off the light that is within them, right? They're transparent to the light within them, so the light shines out in an infinite way. And this is exactly what he says next, right? Midatan Eser, even though there's 10 Sfirot, right? There are 10 Sfirot that have no end. Then, even though they're 10 Sfirot, they have no end, meaning to say that they don't limit the light within them. In fact, they enhance the light that is within them because they transmit that light outwards, so to speak, right? They transmit that light out, and the light is transmitted through the vessel, so to speak, in an infinite manner. Therefore, she'ein lahem sof, they don't have, there's no end to them. So you might say that this seems to be a contradiction. We're saying that there are 10 sfirot, 10, which is a limitation. It's not an infinite number of sfirot. There's an infinite number of sfirot on a higher level, but there are only 10 sfirot in the world of Atzilut, but nevertheless, they are infinite. Now, how could this be? So there's various explanations of it, but the most plausible explanation, the one that appeals to logic, I suppose you could say, is that the nature of the sfirot, which is the nature of the sfirot is transmitted by the vessels. The nature of that sfirot, there's 10 different natures, there are 10 different aspects of reflecting that light or transmitting that light. There's 10 different paths in which that light is transmitted or reflected, or perhaps even absorbed. That would be called the 10 vessels of the world of Atzilut. So therefore they have a midah, they have a limitation in a sense, right? They have a limitation, the limitation of 10, because there's 10 aspects, but nevertheless, they don't limit the light within them. Now, I know this is kind of a difficult concept perhaps to grasp, how something can be limited in a sense, but nevertheless emit infinite light. So I think we could take this in kind of by a simple analogy. Let's say light is coming through a window. Now, it's true that there's more light outside than there is light inside, right? Inside a room, the window is a window to a room. There's more light outside than there is inside, but the quality of the light itself is the same light, right? The light inside the room, when it comes through an open window, is no different. We're not talking about necessarily going through glass, but let's say just an open window, right? The light is the same light. It didn't change. The photons are the same photons. It might be that the quantitatively, there may be less, but qualitatively, they're exactly the same thing. I think you could use that analogy to explain here that there's 10 windows, so to speak, but the light is all the same infinite light. It's all the same infinite light, even though it goes through sort of that constriction of that particular quality, but nevertheless, the light didn't change thereby. That is the quality of the world of the sfirot of the world of Atzilut. Okay, so is that okay? Everyone's okay with that idea? Oh, we're back. All right, so what's going to happen is this. There's going to be 2 recordings of this because Zoom stopped in the middle. So there's going to be the first part that we just recorded, and then there's going to be the second part that we're about to record. So there'll have to be 2 recordings. It's the same for the same thing. You can merge the recordings. All right, if anyone wants to send me an email how to do them, yeah, okay, so here we go. Let me just explain. There's quite a bit in the chat over here. Yeah, I froze. How does the infinite light get transmitted through finite means? I think I explained that by way of the window. In other words, the light shines through the window. This light shining through the window is essentially qualitatively the same light as the light outside. Quantitatively, it's less, but nevertheless. Yeah, the recording stopped. Okay, we'll merge the recordings. If anyone knows how to merge the recordings, they could tell me. Because I'm not sure exactly how to do it. I guess I can ask Zoom how to do that, but if anyone knows how to do it without asking Zoom, that would be good. This can only occur in Atzilut because that's the essence of Atzilut. Yeah. Okay. You can only see the light for the keli which is limited. Yes, that is true. Yes, in other words, that particular vessel will only transmit, let's call it a certain wavelength of light, but that light that it transmits is infinite. Let's put it that way. All right. Hopefully we've gotten over the problems, but I can hear Windows downloading stuff in the background, so I'm not convinced that this is not going to happen again. Anyway, let's see what transpires. We will try and get past the problem as fast as possible. All right. Okay. But interestingly enough, he does say another thing, which is an important thing to know. The measure is 10, which have no end, which we just said, but nevertheless, there is a possibility of figuring them out, of what's called cheker, that can be sort of discovered through a process of inquiry and understanding. Even though the infinite light is definitely beyond us, nevertheless, we can get an inkling of what it's all about by delving into the subject. Interestingly enough, some of the commentaries explain that Abraham, the patriarch Abraham, who we're sort of living with this week, in the section called Lech Lecha, in the parasha called Lech Lecha, where Abraham is told to go to the Holy Land. So Abraham, through his service, his divine service, was hospitality to everybody, kindness to everybody. So through his hospitality of inviting in guests, even sometimes somewhat obnoxious guests, nevertheless, and the purposes of inviting guests was to promulgate, to transmit the divine teachings which he had become privy to, was to transmit them to the entire world for anyone who wanted to listen. So through his service in doing this, in promulgating and spreading, in teaching the divine teachings, he actually was able to achieve this level of 10 without end. He was able to achieve that, and he was really the first one, essentially, to be able to achieve that that very admirable goal of essentially ascending to the world of Atzilut. Okay. Now, the Mishnah goes on now to say a depth of beginning and a depth of end. Now, if you count them up, you'll see that there's actually 10 depths that I mentioned here. Depth of beginning, depth of end, that's 2. Depth of good, depth of evil, that's 4. Depth above, depth below, that's 6. Depth of east, depth of west, that's 8. And north and south, depth of north, depth of south, that's 10. These are essentially the sphirot that are referred to in these terms. The only question is, what is the depth of evil? We have to kind of discuss that and try and understand what we mean over here. In addition, what do we mean by depth? So some of the commentaries have pointed out that the word omek in Hebrew, ayin vav mem kuf in Hebrew, has the numerical value of the word gevura. Gevura means 2 things. Gevura can mean limitation. It can mean power, and actually it can mean several things. It can mean limitation, it can mean power, and it can mean overcoming. So it depends on how we're interpreting this concept of omek. That will determine what these terms mean. Depth of beginning, depth of end, depth of good, depth of evil. Depth of evil, if we want to translate it as the ability to overcome evil, then we'll understand things a little bit better. We'll understand what we mean. It's not that God created evil. It's true, God created the possibility for evil, but he didn't create evil per se. But what he also created at the same time was the ability to overcome evil. Every negative thing is accompanied by that which can overcome it. So similarly with the depth of evil. So let's begin to understand, first of all, what is the depth of the beginning and the depth of the end. The depth of the beginning really means, in terms of the creation, in terms of the creation as a whole, it means right at the beginning where things actually began. Now, there's a discussion, perhaps you could say an argument about exactly where we count that from. What do we count as the beginning? There are some who count the beginning as what is called the tzimtzum, the divine contraction, the contraction of the divine light, called the tzimtzum, which created the void into which all the worlds were placed. All of the worlds, all of creation is in this void. Now, what do we mean by a void? The way it's explained in Hasidic texts is that it's not really a void. The light is still there. It's concealed. It's on such a high, it's lifted up to such a high level that it is not possible for it to be revealed at this point in time. It will be revealed in the future. In the messianic future, it will be revealed. But nevertheless, at this point in time, it's not revealed. Nevertheless, it's there. There are other explanations that are not the non-Hasidic explanations. We don't need to go into now, but nevertheless, there are those that say that the tzimtzum, this concealment of the divine light to create the void in which creation could exist, that was the depth of above. That's the depth of above. Yeah, I just recorded that first part of the meeting. Okay. That's called the depth of the beginning. What's the depth of the end? The depth of the end, according to this, is therefore at that time when the depth of the beginning will be revealed in the end. In other words, in the end of days. The end of days in the comic book understanding is everything's going to blow up and disappear, and that'll be the end of all humanity and the end of all everything. The universe is basically going to blow up or whatever. That's not the way it's understood in Jewish texts. In Jewish texts, it's understood that the end of everything is that when everything moves to a higher level of divine consciousness. In other words, to the original level of divine consciousness as it was right at the beginning of creation, which is ultimate divine consciousness. And therefore, the world will be a completely different place. The world that we knew it will no longer exist. It will be a completely different world, be a world of light rather than a world of darkness. So that's called the depth of end. The end is not meant in a negative sense. It's meant in the sense of when we finally get to the end of time as we know it, and it's not going to be the end of time per se, but the end of the world as we know it, until it moves up to this higher level. That's called the depth of the end. Okay, what's omek tov or omek ra, the depth of good and the depth of evil? So the depth of good, as we already mentioned, is the concept of the revelation of divine goodness through the emanation of divine light. Right, the light of the Ein Sof, the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light of Ein Sof, that is the depth of good. Right, and what's the depth of evil? The depth of evil is for the darkness to be conquered by the light. That depth of evil is not evil per se. It's only evil in the sense that the light has not been revealed therein. Or maybe you could call it yes evil. It's yes evil, but it's only evil because it hasn't been overcome by the light. It's the darkness that needs to be illuminated, and ultimately not just illuminated, but transformed into light itself. Now that's quite a tall order, but that is the requirement. In fact, that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's one of the fundamental teachings, in fact, of the Baal Shem Tov, different from everybody else, as far as everybody else was concerned, particularly, let's say, the Arizal and the Zohar, and most Kabbalists until the time of the Baal Shem Tov, they felt that the way to deal with evil was to push it away and to destroy it. The Baal Shem Tov came along and he said, evil can be rectified, and not only rectified, it can be elevated. Evil can be elevated. We see this in a practical sense as well. Those people, for example, they're called in Hebrew Ba'alei Tshuva, people who were born or born into non-religious families, or who were born into religious families but became non-religious and then returned to the fold, those people can bring with them their experiences in the world which are contrary to the teachings of Judaism and the teachings of the Torah. They can bring them back into the fold. In other words, they can elevate them into a state of holiness. And that's really what is required. Now, there's a whole discussion even amongst Hasidim, whether it's possible in the normal course of things to rectify absolute evil. There's a discussion about it. The conclusion generally is that it is possible, but it's not the general manner of doing things. Our function is not to go and rectify absolute evil. Our function is to take the mundane world, the mundanity of the world, and elevate it. But there are those amongst the great saintly people who are capable of transforming the darkness into light, evil into good. This is not for everybody, and it is usually a very dangerous path to travel down. In fact, there's one explanation that that's what Adam thought he could do. Adam, the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, was that Adam thought that he could rectify the concept of evil by elevating it right away. He was not ready to do that, and he got badly damaged there by himself. It wasn't the right time and it wasn't the right manner. So in any event, that's I don't want to get into the whole explanation, but that was one of the mistakes that he made. There might have been several others, but that was his mistake essentially. Okay. So there's that depth that can be elevated in certain circumstances and by certain people. A depth of above, a depth of below. The way this is explained in the Sfirot is that this is the idea of Keter and Malchut. Keter, the highest of the Sfirot, and Malchut, the lowest of the Sfirot. The depth above, that would be Keter. The depth below would be Malchut. And the idea is not to leave the two as separated, but to bring the depth up above into the depth below, into Malchut. In other words, into the world in which we find ourselves now, to bring the highest levels of divine consciousness into the world of Malchut. There are many other explanations of that, but that is one of the explanations that personally to me appeals very much, because the function or the purpose, the mission that we have in this world is the mission of transforming the world into a better place, into a place where divinity can be revealed, where godliness is, so to speak, at home, as I think I mentioned many times. In terms of the soul, this means the depth of the soul, the very highest level of the soul, which is called Yechida. As we know, there are 5 levels of the soul, or if you want to put it in more modern language, 5 levels of consciousness. The highest level of the soul is called God consciousness, or Yechida is the proper term. And then it goes Yechida, Chaya, Neshama, Ruach, Nefesh. Nefesh, the lowest level, is the consciousness of the world through the senses, essentially. The consciousness of the world through the senses. That's called Nefesh. And the idea is to bring the very highest levels of consciousness, the consciousness of Yechida, down into the mundane, everyday, sensory world, which is a world that we sense and we work with the world around us all the time, to bring that consciousness into so that, in other words, when we look at something, we don't see simply a chair or a stone or a house or a flower or an animal or whatever it is, but you see a permutation of godliness, of the divine, the word of God, essentially, which the chair is, which the house is, which the plant is, which the animal is, right? That's what they are. To be able to see that, so that's a very high level of consciousness, and that is one of the tasks that the Baal Shem Tov set out to instruct his disciples in, to connect the highest levels with the lowest levels, the secrets of the secrets with very simple people. That even simple people are able to grasp the deepest secrets of the Torah, the deepest secrets of Jewish mysticism, when it's explained to them in the right way. Okay. To connect the highest and the lowest. All of these manifestations, all of these 10 manifestations, the 10 Sefirot, we didn't explain north and south, but depth of north and south would essentially be it's Tiferet and Malchut, or it could be Chesed and Gvura, or it could be, there's various explanations, it could be Netzach and Hod. It's just the various of the Sefirot. But nevertheless, the main point that he concludes with is that there's one master over all of them. In other words, all of these manifestations are only manifestations of divine powers, essentially. And there's one master of all the powers. In other words, they all, so to speak, belong to him. They're all part of that divine, the divine being, the part of God, essentially. Now, the various Kabbalistic works explain that all of these Sefirot are associated, each Sefirah is associated with one divine name. And just as a name is not a thing in itself, it's a name of somebody, but it's the name of somebody in a certain role. As the Midrash says, when Moses wanted to know, when Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to know God's name, so he said, what's your name? So he said, my name you wish to know, according to my deeds, I am called. According to my actions, I'm called. So therefore, when it's an action of kindness, then the name Aleph Lamed Kel applies. If it's an action of Gvura, then the name then the name Elokim applies, and so on and so forth. Each of the Sefirot has its particular name associated with it. But since the name is essentially the name of the person, so for example, when you're, let's say you're at work, and you're the boss, let's say, right? So everybody's going to call you boss. If people call them, boss today, but anyway, just by way of analogy. But when you get home, you're going to be called husband or wife, right? To your parents, you're my child. Yeah. To your friends, you're my buddy. So in other words, you have different names by which you can be called. You can be called boss, you can be called husband or wife, depending on what you are. You can be called son or daughter. You could be called my friend. I suppose you could be called my enemy as well. That's, by people who don't like you, whatever. In other words, you have these various names, but it's all talking about the same person. It's just different relationships. The same thing is true of the divine names, each of which designates the 10 divine names, each of which designates a certain Sefirah or characterizes a certain Sefirah. But all of these are essentially all the names of one entity. They're the names of God himself, right? And that's why it's called Adon Yachid, the singular master, God, the faithful king, dominates over all of them. In other words, all of these things are not independent powers. These are powers that he manifests and therefore controls, obviously, from his holy dwelling, in other words, from up above, until eternity of all eternities. Now, when we say eternity of all eternities, it's obviously an expression which needs some explanation. There are actually several explanations of what this means, but one of the explanations is that when you say ad until eternity, so you seem to be limiting eternity until eternity. But the explanation is not that. There's ad v'ad bichlon and ad shelo v'lo ad bichlon, meaning to say there's the word until sometimes excludes, in other words, up to but not including, and then there's until, which actually includes. And the intention here is that it includes the end. Ad means until we get to the end of all things. In other words, the end of all things, where things move up to the level of eternity. Things move up from a state of limitation to a state of infinite being. In other words, everything is merged into the infinity of the divine light, the infinity of the Or Ein Sof. Everything is moved up into that level, and that's what it means. Essentially, the idea of ad until but including eternity, up to and including eternity. Okay, that is the Mishnah. Are there any questions? Oh, very good. Very nice. Joy of getting it right the second time. Good. Good. Now let me just answer some of these. The colored glass, yeah, right. Could be the colored glasses. Yeah, that's the mashal, the analogy that the Ramak uses to explain, right? Uses to explain because according to the Ramak, the light, so the light that is in the Sefirot is all the same light, and it's only colored by the various vessels, or limited and colored by the various vessels. But the Arizal doesn't necessarily agree with that, because the whole concept called the Sefirot, and that's only the light, and the light itself is Sefirot. Yeah, let's not get into it now. It's quite a complicated argument. If you're interested, I have lectures on that in Ayin Beis, the famous hemshech from the Rebbe Rashab called Ayin Beis. They're also online, but the channel is called Hasidus Decoded. It's not for beginners. It's I mean, you can go and have a look. It's open to everybody, but it's quite complicated stuff. And the students that I'm teaching there are on how much, you know, they're capable of learning on their own. It's just we're learning this particular work called Ayin Beis. It's named after the year that it was said. Bashashe Higdimu, in the that's the name of the work that we were studying. So I think we reached up to chapter in the 30s, I think, something like that, chapter 30 something, 35 maybe, whatever. What is defined as evil? Evil is defined as the absence of good, but there is evil that is so absent from the good is so absent from it that it becomes an entity. It only becomes an entity at a certain level, in other words, the very, very lowest levels, but evil can become an entity. Essentially, evil is simply the absence of good. But because human beings have free choice, they can sort of make evil into an entity. I am familiar with the Nefesh HaTzimtzum books, yes. I have it here on my shelves behind me. The Nefesh HaTzimtzum, yeah. But that's the explanation of Tzimtzum according to Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, essentially. How does it relate to a black hole? I think it only relates to a black hole. You can use a black hole as an analogy for the Tzimtzum. In other words, the black hole is obviously something that occurs in the physical universe, and it is the energy of the black hole is so powerful that it prevents the light from escaping. In other words, the light is dragged down into the black hole and therefore cannot escape, so to speak. In the analog, not in the analogy, but in the analog, in other words, in what the metaphor stands for, in Kabbalistic terminology, it's not like that. It's that the light is on such a high level, not that it's dragged down by gravity, by the gravity of the black hole, but that it can't be revealed in the black hole because it's too high of an energy. It's too high to be revealed on that lower plane, and therefore needs to be constricted in order to be revealed down there. Or that plane of emptiness needs to be lifted up towards the light so that the light will be revealed in it. That's essentially what we try to do. Good. Metaphysics of the Tzimtzum, quantum leap. Quintessential property of Tzimtzum is this continuous nature. In mathematics, we have continuous functions. They not have abrupt changes in the values. In discontinuous functions, they have abrupt changes in the values. When represented as a graph, a continuous function is represented by an unbroken curve. Was a time where the discontinuous function is represented by a broken curve. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's what the Tzimtzum does. Essentially, the Tzimtzum makes discontinuation between the Or and Sof, between before and the void afterwards. But that discontinuation is only, it's a two-way street, and only one of the ways is the discontinuation. In other words, in terms of us, in terms of we who are in the void, there's a discontinuation. But in terms of what's above the void, there's no discontinuation. We bring it down and then it lifts, or do we have both actions at the same time? Essentially, both actions at the same time. Both actions at the same time. We bring it down into this world. In other words, bring the divinity down into this world. And every time you bring a little piece of divinity down into the world, that elevates the world a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, until eventually the divine light within it will overcome the darkness, so to speak. All right. Any more questions? Again, no class tomorrow night. I will be going to, okay, yeah. All right, folks, hold a minute. That statement needs to be examined. The Ramak has a different take on it. On what? On the Tzimtzum. The Ramak does not know the whole story of the Tzimtzum. The Ramak was not privy to the concept of Tzimtzum. As far as he was concerned, the Tzimtzum was simply a very long chain of cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, where the effect is less than the cause, and the further you go down, eventually you get to the created world. The Arizal points out that can't be. It's not possible for infinite to become finite in that way. But perhaps you have a different question. I'm not sure if that was the question. In any event, you're welcome to either present it now, or you can email me and we can discuss it that way. All right, folks, appreciate it. And if I can, I will try and join these videos together. If I can't, then we'll have to post it as two videos as an A and B part of the same video. Okay. Alrighty. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks.